Picture the world at the dawn of the 20th century, a time when empires ruled, with the British Empire, the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Russian Empire being among the most formidable. These global powerhouses had complex alliances and rivalries, a web of relationships that was as intricate as it was unstable. Imperialism was the name of the game, with nations expanding their territories far and wide, often clashing over shared interests and coveted resources. Militarism, too, was a growing concern, as advancements in technology led to an arms race, each nation striving to outdo the other in terms of military might. And let's not forget nationalism, a double-edged sword, inspiring a sense of pride and unity, yet also sowing seeds of discontent and division. This was a world teetering on the edge, a single spark away from conflict. On June 28, 1914, the world's destiny changed forever. On this fateful day, Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife, Duchess Sophie, were assassinated. The culprit, a 19-year-old Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. This wasn't just a simple act of violence, though. It was a spark that ignited an already volatile situation. Serbia and Austria-Hungary had been locked in a bitter struggle for dominance in the Balkans. This assassination escalated the tensions between the two nations to a breaking point. In response to the assassination, Austria-Hungary, with Germany's backing, issued an ultimatum to Serbia. When Serbia failed to comply fully, Austria-Hungary declared war. This declaration set off a domino effect, as alliances formed over the previous decades were invoked. Before long, Europe was embroiled in a conflict that would soon spread across the globe. A single bullet had set the world on a path to war. The world watched in horror as the Great War broke out. Suddenly, the globe was caught in a conflict of unprecedented scale and devastation. The major players quickly formed into two formidable sides. On one side, the Central Powers, a coalition of Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria. On the other side, the Allies, primarily France, Russia, and the United Kingdom, later joined by Italy, Japan, and other nations. As the war spread, it was not confined to Europe alone. From the sands of the Middle East to the waters of the Atlantic, the Pacific, and even the Indian Ocean, the war became a truly global conflict. Battles raged across continents, in skies and on seas, marking the Earth with a level of destruction that the world had never seen before. Significant battles like the Battle of the Marne, Gallipoli Campaign, and the Battle of Verdun, among others, changed the course of the war and shaped the destiny of nations. The Battle of the Somme, particularly, was one of the bloodiest military battles in history, with over 1 million men wounded or killed. The face of warfare was forever changed with the introduction of trench warfare. Soldiers spent weeks, months, even years in these trenches, facing not just the enemy, but also the harsh realities of war, including disease, hunger, and the chilling cold. The landscape of the battlefields was transformed into a vast network of trenches, a grim testament to the scale of the war. The war also saw the advent of new technology that would redefine combat. Tanks, initially developed by the British, added a new dimension to ground warfare. Chemical weapons, too, made their horrific debut, introducing a new level of terror and destruction. Amidst the unfolding chaos, one thing was clear. The world was witnessing a war like no other before. This was not just a battle between armies, but a clash of ideologies, economies, and entire ways of life that would leave a lasting impact on the world. The Great War was reshaping the world, one battle at a time. Across the Atlantic, a neutral America watched the war unfold. For 3 years, the United States remained on the sidelines. But everything changed in 1917. 2 events in particular turned the tide. The first was the sinking of the Lusitania, an ocean liner carrying American citizens among its passengers, by a German U-boat. This shocking act of aggression stirred the American public sentiment against the Central Powers. Then came the Zimmermann telegram. Germany, in a desperate move, attempted to forge an alliance with Mexico, promising lost territories in return for joining the war against the United States. British intelligence intercepted the message and handed it over to the Americans. The revelation ignited a surge of patriotism and anger. In April of 1917, President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany. The once neutral observer was now an active participant. With America's entry, the scales of war were tipping. In 1918, the world held its breath as the war reached its climax. The year was marked by 2 significant offensives that would ultimately lead to the end of the war. The first of these occurred in the spring of that year. The German Spring Offensive, also known as the Kaiserschlacht, was Germany's last-ditch effort to win the war before American forces could fully engage. They aimed to split the British and French forces and drive the British into the sea. However, the offensive was costly and lacked strategic depth, leading to its eventual failure. As the German forces were exhausted from their spring offensive, the Allies seized the opportunity to strike back. The 100 Days Offensive, launched in August, was a series of attacks by the Allies against the Central Powers on the Western Front. It started with the Battle of Amiens, which marked one of the first major uses of combined arms tactics, integrating infantry, artillery, and armor in a coordinated attack. The offensive was a success. The Central Powers were pushed back, and the German army was left demoralized and depleted, paving the way for the end of the war. In the early hours of November 11th, delegates from the warring nations gathered in a railway car in Compiègne, France. After lengthy negotiations, they signed the armistice, effectively ending the war. The cost of this war was immense. The human toll alone is staggering. Millions of soldiers and civilians lost their lives, and countless others were left wounded or permanently scarred by the horrors of the war. Cities and towns were destroyed, landscapes were irreparably altered, and societies were left in turmoil. World War I was a conflict like no other. It was a war that introduced the world to the full horror of modern warfare, a war that changed the world in ways that are still felt today. On November 11th, 1918, the guns finally fell silent. The world was forever changed by the Great War. The signing of the Treaty of Versailles in June of 1919 marked the official end of World War I, but not the end of its consequences. This treaty, designed to ensure peace, instead sowed the seeds of future conflict. Germany, the defeated power, was burdened with war guilt and reparations. The heavy financial obligations and territorial losses imposed by the treaty led to a sense of resentment and national humiliation among the Germans, creating a fertile ground for the rise of extremism that would eventually lead to World War II. In the wake of the war, the geopolitical landscape was dramatically altered. The map of Europe was redrawn, with new nations emerging from the ashes of fallen empires. The United States, having entered the war late, emerged relatively unscathed and economically stronger. It marked the beginning of America's rise as a significant global player. But the impact of the war was not confined to the political sphere. Society itself was transformed. Women, having taken on roles traditionally held by men during the war years, began to demand greater rights and freedoms, marking a significant step forward in the women's rights movement. Moreover, the war left a deep psychological scar on those who lived through it. The sheer scale of death and destruction led to a sense of disillusionment among the survivors. They came to be known as the Lost Generation, their literature and art reflecting the despair and questioning of long-held beliefs brought about by the war. Though the guns had fallen silent, the echoes of World War I would be heard for decades to come. The Great War was a turning point in human history, its effects rippling through the years, shaping the world as we know it today.